what we are doing leading up to the draft, which is now literally less than a month away, is covering every single possible Detroit Red Wings 4th overall pick. So not anything that can happen, theoretically, like we're not going to cover Emile Andre as a possible 4th overall pick, like all of the likely 4th overall picks. We're going to be doing deep dives on all of them, analysis of their play, which we might have already done before for some of these guys, but then we're also going to be talking about where they would fit in the Red Wing system, the likelihood of that pick, how we would feel personally about that pick, what it would mean for who they would have to leave on the board, how big of a risk it would be. Pretty much looking at this from a completely Red Wings 4th overall centric angle, and then going from there. So today's is none other than Swedish sniper, the best goal scorer in the draft, Alexander Holtz.
Well, if we're talking about fit and need, Alex Holtz checks those boxes in two fronts. Big right shooting forward who can score, and an absolute threat off the left half wall on the power play. Two things the Red Wings do not have at the moment. Again, Holtz, as we've talked about at length, his shot is what's going to make him his money, but he's still a good, well-rounded offensive player. Not a great skater, not a bad skater. Bigger than Lucas Raymond and Cole Perfetti and all that. He's north of 6 feet tall, which helps. His case versus them, at least. Not as dynamic as the other guys, but he gets any time and space in the offensive zone, and he can beat goalies from distance, and he can beat goalies from in tight. Again, right-handed shooting, power shot. There's a reason why we've been petitioning for one of the guys, the Red Wings, to take at 32 is Tyson Forrester. This guy's just Tyson Forrester, except a lot better. So I don't peg him as an overly likely pick at number 4 because of, well, he's just not as dynamic and as skilled as the guys ahead of him, but he's not far off, not as far as people are making it out to be. This guy's a legit top 5 consideration for most teams. I say most teams, it's Detroit and Ottawa, really. I wouldn't be totally shocked if he goes 4th overall just because he fills direct needs for the Red Wings. He's basically the opposite side Filip Zadina, kind of. It's not the, now that I think about it, it's not the worst comparison in the world. Again, I don't think he's as dynamic as Zadina, but hey, here we are. We're covering every angle, and every week we're getting closer and closer to the likely picks, and Holtz isn't that far off.
Yeah, Alex Holtz is by far and gone the best finisher in this draft. Like, his shot is phenomenal, and he uses it a lot, which is good. You want your shooters to shoot. You don't want a trigger shy guy whose best talent is shooting the puck. That said, you did touch on it, Brad. I think he is a little bit more of a well-rounded player than he probably gets credit for. I think it's his decision to shoot more rather than his inability to be a playmaker. I think he actually has pretty decent playmaking ability. It's a little bit harder to find that footage, but watching him more, I think the inverse or flip side, Filip Zadina, is a good description. I think if the Red Wings drafted Holtz, I would be probably more excited about Zadina just for his overall game, but you could not hate how good of a goal scorer this guy could be. Doesn't really have much to say for the defensive side of the game. Doesn't have a ton to say for skating, although I don't think it's really a big issue. There's conversations about, is he shooting too much at the detriment of his teammates? Does he need to be able to have that playmaking touch? And I think if you have him on a top line, like let's say Detroit drafts him and he's playing with, Mantha and Larkin, he's not going to not dish the puck. I don't know much about the depth of the team that he was on in Sweden, but at the same time, I think he probably was the best shooter at all times by a good margin when he was in Djurgården. Like he's the best shooter in this draft, which means he's always the go-to target on the ice, but that'll change at the NHL level. So I can see him adapting that. He has displayed it a little bit. A weaker draft and you'd see this guy going top 4 or 5 in my mind, but there's just too much talent ahead of him, which is why he's not my preference for Detroit. We were referring to Zadina a lot. And so 2 drafts ago, Detroit drafted someone who is a shooter, but I think a more well-rounded playmaker, a more defensively accountable player. So they're not completely identical, but I wouldn't want Holtz considering all of the needs on this team. I'd want a guy who could have a chance to play center or bring something different to the ice. For example, last year when Moritz Seider got picked, right before that, we were practically shouting at the screen for elite playmaker Trevor Zegras. I would still like that elite playmaker to come, and though Alex Holtz doesn't have nothing to say for that, that's just not the strength of his game.
No, he is a bit of a chameleon, though. You touched on it there. He can adapt his style of play. If he is not the best shooter on the ice, he can absolutely dish. And if not even the best shooter on the ice, if he doesn't have the shot, he still knows what to do with the puck. He's not just going to fire it into somebody's shins like a Martin Ferk would. He can dish it around. He can create some space, make the plays. Here's the thing, though. He will almost always be the best shooter on the ice. You put him on the Red Wings tomorrow, he has the best shot on the Red Wings. It's that good. So you want him shooting. When he's on the ice, the game plan should be get players on the ice with him who can get him the puck. So again, there's players like Lucas Raymond and Tim Stützle. When they get the puck, they're making something happen for everybody, them and themselves. And that is true for Alex Holtz as well. Just not as well-rounded as them, not as good a playmaker as them, and obviously with his talent, it shouldn't be the game plan when he's on the ice. So the downside to that is it's easier to game plan against, but that's not on him. That's on his coach to figure out. So when you have that special of a tool, you should use it every chance you get.
Yeah, and it's the most important tool in hockey, right? Like, how do you get points on the board? You score goals. That's what coaches are looking for. Everything is leading up to scoring goals. So if you have a guy that is the best in the entire draft at doing the thing that wins you hockey games, that means a lot. So yeah, it's not a bad thing, or it's not going to hold him down that he's not an elite level playmaker at all times. And even then, like we just discussed, he can demonstrate an ability to dish the puck when needed. The fact that he's not a defensive stalwart won't matter if this guy's going to net, 1 or 2 goals for you in an important game. So Alex Holtz to me is the biggest victim of a extremely strong draft. This is a guy who should be looking at a much higher draft position in the average draft year. Again, I don't think he's complaining, and I think the teams at picks, 6 and beyond are going to be thrilled. And honestly, if you see him come up on the screen as high as 4, don't be shocked. I wouldn't predict it. I would not predict it for Detroit. I don't really see him as being head and shoulders above the other guys around him. I've seen arguments to have him at similar levels to Raymond and Perfetti and Rossi. I don't quite agree, but I wouldn't argue too much. But teams might look at that goal scoring talent and say, yep, that's game breaking. That's the elite talent that we want. And you don't pass up on that when it comes up because it doesn't come up that often.
Hello, you must be Pierre Dorian.
Ottawa fans
Lucas Raymond and Alex Holtz.
The Raymond Holtz memes would be worth it. And obviously the Red Wings getting Stützle would also be worth it.
I wouldn't even criticize Ottawa for that.
They were really good together when they played together. I mean, that's not what I would do, but we would benefit greatly, or the Red Wings would benefit greatly.
Ottawa fans are all talking about getting Byfield or Stützle and then Raymond. I'm like, do you guys really think you're walking away from this without Drysdale? And that's not a bad thing, but I don't know. What do you two think? I don't see Ottawa walking away without Drysdale.
I very much see a reality where Ottawa doesn't take Drysdale. It's because he's going before they get to pick. Oh, please let it happen.
I would love to see that happen.
Again, it's still too early to really put much stock into the rumors going around, but if the draft goes as the rumors have flown, it looks like Ottawa will be walking away with Byfield and Raymond.
That's an insane haul. That is an absolutely insane haul.
If the rumors hold up as true, which they almost never do, and they always change the week, like the day of the draft. We didn't know the Detroit Mort Sider connections till like an hour and a half, 2 hours before the draft. So, I mean, take it for what it's worth, but those in the know around Ottawa have linked them to Lucas Raymond, and people have been linking LA to Jamie Drysdale and Tim Stützle. I mean, I don't see a reality where Ottawa doesn't take Byfield at 3 if he's there at 3.
It'll hurt so much to see Byfield go 3rd.
And if Byfield goes 3, That means the Red Wings probably stick with their original plan, as rumored, Perfetti.
Yeah.
So if Ottawa's linked to Raymond still, there's that. Although it did not come from a good source, but I did see some rumblings that there were now Detroit Raymond connections. But whatever, I didn't confirm that with anything, so I'm not buying it.
Raymond's uncle is a season ticket holder in 1985.
He once played on a beer league team with Håkan Andersson.
All right. Back to Holtz just to wrap it up. Likelihood of Holtz getting picked, just pick an arbitrary percentage, and what would your reaction be?
5% and slight disappointment with intrigue.
Yeah, I'd say I'm somewhere around the same as Brad, 5 to 9%.
Just go all in and say 6 to 9%. We know you want to.
9%.
Nice.
Would I be upset? It all depends on who's still there. If we skip on Byfield or Stützle to take Raymond or Holtz, I'm probably never coming on this podcast again. Yeah, I like his skill set a lot, and I think this team could really use a shooter. So maybe I'd probably be upset. We all know me; I'm always upset.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I like his skill set a lot too, but eventually someone's gonna have to bring the puck to the shooter. So if we keep taking shooters,
well, we got a lot of guys who can't score, so maybe they can learn to do that.
Yeah, that's true. No, I think we're talking about less than 5% chance here. I don't think he's the first person outside of the top 3 that Detroit's looking at, and that's literally who they get to pick from outside of the top 3, or if one of the top 3 falls, right? So their 4th isn't the best pick here, quite obviously, but Detroit's not in a bad spot where they're drafting 6th or 7th, and there might be no one else left that they like. How would I feel? I'm not going to lie to you. I wouldn't be thrilled with this one. Like it would be nothing against Holtz, but it would take me some time to get over leaving Raymond on the board, leaving, maybe Stützle on the board. I don't think there's a world where Byfield falls, so I won't even let myself hope. I wouldn't even feel better. I would rather take the swing on Perfetti. You know, all talk about his skating and concerns with that aside, like I'd rather take a swing on Perfetti and have the elite playmaking talent that he could possibly be. I'd rather swing and miss on that one. But then again, it's much easier to stomach that when this guy's netting 40 goals a year, right? So if that's what he turns out to be, then we look like shitheads. So, and it's such a fine margin. I wouldn't want him at 4 for Detroit because I think he would be taken in lieu of players who I'd much prefer. But I think he'd be a steal at 6 or 7 in terms of the talent that you would usually get there at those years.
Position over perceived value, basically.
Yeah.
Holtz is at the end of my list of players where I'm not rioting if we pick him is probably the best way to put it. I've got 7 or 8 guys right now that I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine, and he's in it, but he's the end of it.
In terms of me saying, like, I'll phrase it this way, like on the live stream, I'll be able to come up with some positives to talk about. There's a line. Below that line is like, no, I literally cannot come up with anything other than anger. And above it, it's like, yeah, sure, I'm disappointed, but I can still bring this into talk about this constructively. Holtz is just above that line, and I think Sanderson is just below that line for me.
Yeah, it's about right.
He's got a good enough skill set where I'm like, all right, let's see what this kid can do at the NHL level. So I'm not like super upset. I'm intrigued, but yeah, there's a lot of other guys who I'd be far more happy with.
I mean, if this kid pops off for 30-30 regularly in the NHL and you got him at 4th overall, that's a win by a value standpoint for whatever that's worth. So you always got to factor that in.
Yeah, we're talking about this with the perspective of the draft now. If he pans out and turns into a 35-40 goal scorer, he'll likely be one of the top 5 players in the draft because not everyone in every top 5 always pans out. It almost never happens that way. So, there's a lot of retroactive analysis that needs to happen far down the line, but hopefully by then we'll be smarter about it. Okay, so that's our review on Alex Holtz. Stay tuned for more next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.